Howdy, folks. It's been a really busy day, but like in a good way. I've got a lot of stuff done, both adulting and just stuff I want to get done. So while everybody else is freaking out, I guess I'm having a good time, really plowing forward on a lot of really, I guess, big projects that I wanted to get done. So I'm pretty stoked right now about this time off. Trying to use it, put it to good use. Stay up maybe a little bit later than I should, but I'm also trying not to sleep all morning long. I've got an alarm set. Most of the time I get up when it goes off, but we're getting stuff done. Got a lot of cleaning done today. I got my Jeep taken in for some piddly things that I've needed to take care of for a while. Just haven't got around to. Nothing big. Should have it back tomorrow evening, but stuff like that. But I'm also getting a lot of work done on novels, and getting a lot of work done on my tabletop gaming system, and studying a lot of stuff. People asking me questions, and I'm getting to converse a lot with a lot more people. Talking Bible study stuff. Steven here has been studying with me on some things, and he's come up with some things that I've never considered before, and it's fantastic. I really appreciate him doing that. Very excited about learning those new things. So anyway, we're going to do Genesis 21 tonight. We're not going to do anything beyond that tonight. I got things I want to get to before I go to bed. Plus, I got my little one up, and she's wanting to sleep up here. We're in the loft right now, and she's wanting to sleep up here. So the faster I get done, she'll lay down in the semi darkness and the quiet up here, and she'll go to sleep. So hopefully she'll do that by about 11 o'clock. Thank you for joining me. We are going to be reading out of the King James. I'll have the ESV up for modern language reference, and then I also have the Hebrew available as well. So, Genesis 21, verse 1. And Jehovah visited Sarah as he had said, and Jehovah did unto Sarah as he had spoken. For Sarah conceived and bare Abraham a son in his old age, at the set time of which God had spoken to him. So remember God's promise to him, you're going to have a son, and it's going to come, the son is going to come at a specific time. When Abraham was 99 is when he was given this promise, so he'll be 100 years old when Isaac is born. And remember, the word Isaac just means to laugh, so, or he laughed. And Abraham called the name of his son that was born unto him, whom Sarah bare to him, Isaac. And Abraham circumcised his son Isaac, being 8 days old, as God had commanded him. So remember, when Ishmael was a little bit older, Abraham got the promise. He got his name changed, and he got the circumcision as part of the covenant. And so everybody was circumcised. And then now Isaac being born on the 8th day, Abraham circumcised. And it's an interesting thing. Okay, Stephen, you're hilarious. The 8th day is interesting because when a child is born, their body, of course, is undergoing chemical changes. No longer are they receiving all of their nutrients, all of the things that they need, including air and whatever, through the umbilical cord. And one of those changes is the way that their circulatory system works. And so 8 days after birth, there is a spike in, I believe it's the vitamin K in their body, and it allows for better clotting, better platelet formation and whatnot. And if the circumcision is going to take place, that's the best day for it to take place for a little bitty baby like that. Also, again, just a quick note, circumcision under the Old Testament was not nearly as much as what they do today. Today is very, very invasive. They take way, way too much today, and it's just it's not good. What the process today is awful. But what the Israelites did is not anywhere close to that, and so it was very safe for them to do that. And again, was part of the covenant. It was Abraham's part of the covenant, and so Abraham is again doing what God has commanded him to do. And Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born unto him. And Sarah said, God has made me to laugh, so that all that hear will laugh with me. And I think she's referring here to Isaac's name. They know what his name is. They know what it means. And remember, these names are part of the Hebrew language, and they mean something. And so now that they've named their son Isaac, Sarah is recognizing, okay, I laughed. Yeah, I admit I laughed, and now everybody's going to laugh with me, and hopefully it'll be a joyful thing. So, let's see here. Stevens is in the medical field, y'all, just so y'all know. He says, oh man, it is amazing what happens in the newborn body at the moment the umbilical cord is cut. Yeah, definitely. And in fact, Heather and I are big fans of waiting to do that, actually. When the baby is born, if you leave the baby attached, there's still blood in the umbilical cord and things that need to kind of process through there before it gets cut. And so we're big fans. We did that with Karis, and she is super healthy because of it. But yeah, then once you cut the umbilical cord, there's a lot of changes that go on. So anyway, verse 7, and Sarah said, who would have said unto Abraham that Sarah should have given children suck? For I have borne him a son in his old age. So kind of a good-natured laugh is what I'm getting out of this. Sarah she's older. Remember, we're still in that time period where the lifespans are kind of shrinking down. They used to be near 1,000 years old, and we've reached past that, and now we're getting down to where Abraham is going to live to be 175, but they're already considering themselves old. So I'm imagining here, how we hear people who are in their early 60s, they refer to themselves as old, but they may live all the way up to 40 years beyond that, even though they consider themselves old. So that's kind of where I'm thinking Sarah and Abraham are feeling themselves to be. Sarah has already gone through what we refer to as menopause. The Bible says that the way of women was not with her. She wasn't going through her period or anything like that. But now she's had a child, and now she is going to be breastfeeding the child. And she's an older lady. And so she said, how many people are going to be kind of laughing at this idea that I, as an older lady, am here, I've got this baby that's breastfeeding. So I'm when I read this, I get a really good-natured kind of laughing at herself kind of idea here. So verse 8, and the child grew and was weaned, and Abraham made a great feast the same day that Isaac was weaned. So time is passing, Isaac is growing, and he's no longer breastfeeding. And then at the time that Isaac was weaned, Sarah saw the son of Hagar the Egyptian, which she had born unto Abraham, mocking. So I wanted to kind of go over to the ESV for this. Sarah saw the son of Hagar the Egyptian, whom she had born to Abraham, laughing. This is the word that's in the original language is the idea is that Ishmael is laughing in mockery. He's laughing at Isaac. Remember, Isaac's name is he laughs. And so this idea of laughing is kind of carried through here, but Ishmael is doing it in mockery. And so it's not the good-natured idea. So, hey, Karis, can you turn it down just a little bit? Thank you. Wherefore Sarah said unto Abraham, cast out this bondwoman and her son, for the son of this bondwoman shall not be heir with my son, even with Isaac. So she gets mad. She gets mad at Ishmael. And so she takes it out on Ishmael and Hagar, even though Hagar hasn't done anything wrong in all of this. But Sarah gets mad and has Abraham cast them out. But this thing is very grievous in Abraham's sight because of his son. from what I get out of this is that Sarah tells Abraham what Ishmael was doing. He hears that Ishmael was, I guess, bullying Isaac or making fun of him. And so Abraham is like upset about it. And God said unto Abraham, let it not be grievous in thy sight because of the lad and because of thy bondwoman. And all that Sarah has said unto thee, hearken unto her voice, for in Isaac shall thy seed be called. So I've always heard that Abraham gets upset with Sarah for this, and he's worried about of this. But when we talk about his son, are we talking about Isaac or are we talking about Ishmael? And so for me, I'm trying to read it and understand it. And I don't know. I kind of go back and forth. Is Abraham upset with Ishmael because of what he was doing to Isaac? Is God saying, calm down. I get that you're upset, but it is okay what you're going to do with them, because Isaac is going to be your heir, and I'll take care of Hagar and Ishmael? Or is this Abraham is upset with Sarah because Sarah is wanting, because Ishmael is his son, and then is Abraham like, no, I don't want to do that at all? And then we end up with God saying, no, it's okay, go ahead and do what Sarah said. I know you're upset with her. I've never been able to come down one way or the other on that. I know that the common way to say is that Abraham gets upset with Sarah. But we also know that Abraham is very, very focused on Isaac, that he is very protective of Isaac, that he knows that Isaac is the son of promise. And so I kind of lean that way. You're right, Nate. He is the ultimate story of faith. And we'll get into that when we get into chapter 22, I believe it is. So I don't know. So leave a comment. Tell me which one you think it is. I know most of you have heard that it's Abraham getting upset with Sarah's idea most of your lives, because that's what I heard in all my Bible classes. So if you have an idea that something can bring me down on one side or the other, then let me know. So anyway, God says to Abraham, let it not be grievous in thy sight because of the lad and because of thy bondwoman, and all that Sarah has said unto you, hearken unto her voice, for in Isaac shall your seed be called. And also of the son of the bondwoman will I make a nation, because he is your seed. So God iterates to Abraham, hey, this is what I promised to Hagar. I'm going to make him a nation too. Doesn't give Abraham all the details, but he says, I'm going to take care of him. Don't worry about it. And so Abraham rises up early in the morning and took bread and a bottle of water and gave it to Hagar, putting it on her shoulder and the child. Remember, Ishmael is 14 years old here. He's not a baby in this sense, but he's still called a child here. So that's an interesting thing here. A child or a youth, he's not considered an adult at this point in time. So he's giving Hagar a bottle of water and some bread, and putting it on her shoulder. And from what I get from this, and the child, the child is possibly also getting water and bread, and sent her away, and she departed and wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba. So Hagar's got this young teen, and just these very, very meager supplies, and she leaves, and she's wandering out in Beersheba. And verse 15 says, and the water was spent in the bottle, and she cast the child under one of the shrubs, and she went and sat down over against him a good way off. So she can see him, but she's far away from him. It says about a bow shot away. And she said she didn't want him to hear what she's saying, but she said, let me not see the death of the child. And she sat over against him and lifted up her voice and wept. So she's out here wandering. Let's see here. God chose Isaac, not Ishmael. This proves that God has something else in mind than mere physical lineage. Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely more to it than this. But anyway, so she's run out of water. They're out of bread, and she thinks they're gonna die. Remember, she's Egyptian. She doesn't necessarily have the same faith in God that Abraham does, but God has already said He's going to take care of her, and so God hears the voice of the lad, and the angel of God called to Hagar out of heaven. Remember, last time Hagar spoke to God, it was actually the angel of the Lord. So God hears the voice of the lad. The angel of God called to Hagar out of heaven and said to her, "What aileth thee, Hagar? Fear not, for God has heard the voice of the lad where he is. Arise, lift up the lad, and hold him in your hand, for I will make him a great nation." So again, the angel of God is speaking, but he says, "I will make him a great nation." So the angel of God here, the messenger of God in this case, is that theophany, is again God himself. So he refers to God in the third person, for God hath heard the voice of the lad. But then he's also saying, "I will make him a great nation." Well, angels don't have the power to do that. Just a mere celestial messenger doesn't have that authority to do that. But God does. And so here we have, I believe very firmly, God the Son saying that he will make him a great nation. And this gets into this idea of Trinity, that there is one God but three persons, and they are in perfect, I don't even think harmony is the right word. I think melody is singular in nature. And so they speak with one voice and one intention. So verse 19, and God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water, and she went and filled the bottle of water, and gave the lad to drink. And God was with the lad, and he grew and dwelt in the wilderness, and became an archer. And he dwelt in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother took him a wife out of the land of Egypt. So Ishmael is already half Egyptian, half Hebrew, and marries an Egyptian. Again, remember this. He's a lad. He's a kid. He's not a baby. He's already able to somewhat provide for himself, and so he grows in the next few years, becomes a skilled archer, and eventually marries this woman out of Egypt. And then let's see, Nate. I think Abraham was beset on multiple sides with stress and a challenge to his faith, and ultimately had to rely on his faith, even though it probably felt like an unpleasant option. And in that we can learn that leaning on God in our worst of times, if we don't like the perceived results, can net the best possible results. Absolutely trusting in God. Abraham had a lot of rough things happen to him. He was asked to leave his entire family behind and strike off, trusting this one God out of many, one that still walked and talked to those on the earth, but still just one out of many. His father worshipped idols. And then we have, he is fearful. He's in all of these different lands. He's in the land of Gerar with Abimelech. He's with the Egyptians, and he's afraid for his life because his wife is good looking. His nephew, it eventually creates a burden on him, and then eventually his nephew is captured, and Abraham has to go rescue him. And then all of the cities where his nephew lived were destroyed except for a little bitty town called Zoar. So all of these things that have happened to Abraham, and now his wife has kind of given him some issues because she's like, "Well, I'm too old to have a kid. Here, let's help God out, and you take my handmaiden." And then turns around and says, "No, I don't want her, cast her out. I got my own son." Now, there's all kinds of stuff. But there is a lot of things that are happening to Abraham. But to say all of that, I don't think Abraham actually ever gave up his faith or had his faith like severely, like he didn't ever doubt, is my understanding. He was very strong in his belief. Like whenever God said to do something, he did it, and he trusted in God. I don't think there was any hesitation in Abraham's faith at all. So Stephen says, Romans 4:20, he did not waver at the promise of God through unbelief, but was strengthened in faith, giving glory to God. Yeah, every test that Abraham got, absolutely, his faith never wavered. It was never hesitant. It was always all right, God said do this, I'm going to do it. And then every time he was tested, he came out stronger on the other side. So just exactly what I was just saying. With no doubting. The word did not waver means the same thing as no doubting in the book of James. Right. And I mean, that's exactly what Abraham was like. And I think that's why he's called the father of faith. But both of what you guys are saying is true. Abraham was beset by a lot. He had a lot of trials and a lot of stress in his life, but he continued to trust in God without that wavering. And every time his faith was rewarded, and he came out on the other side even stronger. In fact, we're about to see in 22 probably his greatest test. And I think that everything that God calls Abraham to do is to show Abraham how strong his faith really was, and to help make him even stronger. Yeah, it is. It is easy to waver if the world, if the call of the world is strong. One of the things, though, about maturing as a Christian, and I think this is where Abraham here has been wandering around. He left when he was 75, so 25 years of following after Jehovah alone. As you mature step by step in God and your faith in Christ, is you start to lose that call of the world, and the risk of wavering grows less and less, and you eventually will get to a point, I believe that mature Christians will get to a point where their faith is so strong that they don't doubt anymore. That, okay, yeah, rough stuff comes along. There are hard things that we face in this life. Sometimes because we make them hard. Sometimes because that's just the world as it is. Because we live in a fallen world, thanks to Adam and Eve. But the mature Christian, without wavering, without doubt, without fear, puts God at the forefront and says, look, God, you brought me through this many years. For Abraham, it's 25. You brought me through 25 years of this. And I know now, I trust now that you're going to bring me through this next thing. And I think that's really what God allows us to be tested for. We see the book of Job. Job was already a very strong, faithful man, but God allowed him to be tested. And then after all the things that he went through, not just the things that he lost in the first two chapters, but then all the questioning from his quote-unquote friends, and then him facing God with his own questions, with his own inner turmoil, and then what does he come out on the other side? He comes out stronger. So, yeah, Nate, I'm glad you could join us for a moment, and I'd love to, if you have any questions, just post them in the comments when you do the rewatch. So have a good night. So anyway, verse 22, and it came to pass at that time that Abimelech and, I'm guessing this is Phicol, is how you pronounce this. I have no idea. It's Phichol. So Phicol, the chief captain of his host, spake unto Abraham. So you got Abimelech's there with his I guess his general. They speak unto Abraham, saying, God is with thee in all that you do. Now therefore swear unto me here by God that you will not deal falsely with me, nor with my son, nor with my son's son. But according to the kindness that I have done unto you, you shall do unto me into the land wherein you have sojourned. And Abraham said, I will swear. Now remember, Abimelech is a good guy. He believes in God. I don't know if he believes in God only, but that's likely. We don't have any hint that he worshipped any other gods. But he's had opportunity to speak with God directly, in his dreams at least. And so he sees Abraham is blessed by God and in God's favor. And so he's like, look, I want to be allies with this guy because he's allies with God. And so there's a really, really strong indication here that Abimelech was a pretty good guy. So Stephen says, faith is like muscle. It grows when it is worked, when it is stressed and challenged. Easy living makes a man's muscles weak. as well as his faith. James says this silver lining in the testing of faith is that the man who endures is perfecting himself. Yeah. Very, very much so. I agree with that. In fact, I have said for many years now, probably since I was a teenager, that man does not grow without conflict. That we need the conflict to grow. And if you think about it, like when a muscle is torn, or when a muscle is exercised, it's torn. There's micro tears all over a muscle, and then when we rest, if we have good nutrition and we rest, then those muscles grow back and they grow back stronger. Or when you break a bone, if the bone is set properly, when it grows back stronger, and that bone is harder to break. I think there's some biological lessons in there for us, and we can extrapolate those to spiritual lessons that we when we are tested and challenged, and sometimes even if we're broken, we can be mended, we can be set, and then when we grow back, our faith is even stronger because of it. So I think that's an excellent lesson there. So and Abraham reproved Abimelech because of a well of water. So there's this first challenge to their alliance here. And it says, because Abimelech's servants had violently taken it away. And so I'm guessing this isn't the same day here. I imagine some time has passed, and then their little treaty here is tested, and Abraham says, "Hey, your servants have violently taken away a well of water from me." And so Abimelech said, "I do not know who has done this thing, neither did they. Did you tell me? Neither have I heard of it, but just now." And Abraham took sheep and oxen and gave them unto Abimelech, and they made a covenant. And Abraham set 7 ewe lambs of the flock by themselves. And Abimelech said to Abraham, "What means these 7 ewe lambs which you have set by themselves?" And he said, "For these 7 ewe lambs shall you take of my hand, that they may be a witness unto me that I have digged this well." So here's the deal. Abraham saying, these guys came and I have this well, and your guys came and they took it away from me violently. And Abimelech's like, I haven't heard any of this. I don't know anything about this. And so Abraham is saying, look, to show you that I'm telling you the truth, here are these 7 female lambs, and I'm setting them aside for you, and they're a witness. They're my kind of guarantee that what I'm saying is the truth. We might think of it like as a loan that we take out, where we put up something. Like right now I have a loan out, kind of a small loan out, but my Jeep is collateral for it. And so if I don't pay the loan back, then they take my Jeep. So verse 30, Abraham says, "And he said, For these 7 ewe lambs shall you take of my hand, that they may be a witness unto me that I have digged this well." Wherefore he called that place Beersheba, because there they swear both of them. Now, this is a reminder that Moses is writing well after these events, and his audience is the Israelites, because we read earlier on, where did Hagar and Ishmael end up? They ended up wandering in the land of Beersheba. Verse 14, "And she departed and wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba." Well, it wasn't called Beersheba when she was wandering in it at that time, because Abraham doesn't call it that until verse 31. So just another reminder that the way that these things are called, the way that these places are named, they're named for reference for the Israelites. They will recognize the names. They will know where these names are, even though the characters and I don't mean to say that these are fictional characters, but the people in Moses' historical narrative here may not know those names at the time. And I'll make a point about that in just a second here after we finish up with the text. "Thus they made a covenant at Beersheba. Then Abimelech rose up, and Phicol, the chief captain of his host, and they returned in the land of Philistines." All right, so that tells me, I guess I was mistaken before, that this was done all in the same day, and Abraham, I guess, is bringing this up then in verse 25. So they sit down to have this meeting, in verse 22, and the meaning goes all the way to verse 32. And I guess Abraham brings this up during the meeting then. So that I find that interesting. And as you can tell, I didn't have time to read this beforehand. I was so busy today. But I find that interesting because Abimelech's like, hey, God's got your back. I want to be on the good side. I want to have this treaty with you. Will you swear to like the third and fourth generation that you're not going to do anything to me or my descendants? And Abraham's like, sure, I'll swear. Now that I've sworn, I'm going to bring this up. And so he talks to him about this well. And then Abraham gives him these things, these gifts, to show that Abraham's like, look, there are no hard feelings here. Here's a gift for you. But please understand, I'm giving you this because I want you to understand that I am sincere in telling the truth about this well. And so that's pretty cool. But it looks like Abraham and Abimelech turn out to be pretty good buds. And for my part, every time I read about Abimelech, he sounds like he's a pretty cool guy. I have the same feelings when I read about Nebuchadnezzar. I don't know Nebuchadnezzar all that well from historical accounts. All I know of Nebuchadnezzar is what I read from the Bible. And everything I read from the Bible is that, yeah, he worshipped false gods. Yeah, he did some things that weren't great. But as he gets older and progresses, and the more he learns about Jehovah God, Nebuchadnezzar becomes more and more aware. And I would argue that there's a good... It's open. It's allowable by Scripture that Nebuchadnezzar may have died believing in Jehovah God. May be one of those people that were like, hey, Nebi, you ended up here when the end of time comes and we're all in eternity in the presence of God. That would not. I would be less surprised by Nebuchadnezzar being there than some of the other people that I read about in Scripture and some of the other people that I know in real life. Because of what we read. So Abimelech is like that too. Abimelech, he sounds like he's a really good guy. He sounds like he believes in God. He's friends with Abraham and makes this covenant with Abraham through some friction at the beginning of their relationship. They actually turn out to be pretty good friends, and I think it's a fun, just a cool story to read about is Abraham and Abimelech here. So. So they rise up, Phicol, the chief captain of his host, and they return into the land of the Philistines. So the Philistines are already about in the time of Abimelech and Abraham. And Abraham planted a grove in Beersheba and called there on the name of Jehovah, the everlasting God. So he worships God. And Abraham sojourned in the Philistines' land many days. So Abraham was there for quite a long time. So here we have the birth of Isaac, and we have the exile of Hagar and Ishmael, and then we have the covenant between Abraham and Abimelech. And I want to make a point about names and how things are called and the perspective of Moses and the Israelites real quick. Moses is writing around 1600 years before the cross. And at that point in time, we know that things are called a certain thing at that point in time. When Moses writes them down, we know that they're called that. We do not have any indication that places geographically are called something before that until Moses actually tells us, and Abraham called that place Beersheba or whatever. But there's another part of this that kind of goes into the naming of things. When we look in Genesis 2, and God brings all of the animal kinds to Adam, Adam called them according to their kind. And one of the things that Bible skeptics like to bring up is the idea that bats they tend to be categorized with birds, that they're called birds. And we look at the English words a lot of times through the lens of translation. and we look at it through the lens of what we call our advanced scientific knowledge. One of those things is, for instance, if you look at the way that the sun is spoken of, the sun is spoken of as moving across the sky, and the moon is moving across the sky. Well, that's how they would have understood it. Could you imagine God talking to these people and saying, "Well, actually, you're on a big solid rock that's a sphere, and it's rotating, and you're rotating as you orbit or revolve around this big ball of gas burning 146 million kilometers away." What? It's easier to speak in the language of the time. When God communicates, he communicates to the people of that time in the language of that time that they would understand, without actually contradicting what is being said, or the reality of the world. So when Moses refers to bats as birds, to them, they don't have the precise categorizing of animals like we do. We have words like species and genus and the genotype and phenotype and all of that kind of stuff. Well, if you look at a bat and a bird, they both have feet, they both have wings, they're warm-blooded, and they fly. Okay, well, we're going to call those things birds. Is that word a species? Is that a genus? Is that... No, they're just a generic name for flying warm-blooded animals. And we don't have to get any more specific than that, because of the people that we're talking to. Former slaves coming up out of Egypt don't care that a bat is a mammal and a bird is not. They don't care that we should make scientific distinction between a bird and a bat because the bat has babies and a bird has eggs. They don't. There's no need to differentiate in these contexts, and so this goes back to that idea of who is the prime audience, and the absolute need for, when we're reading the Bible, to understand things in the terms that the prime audience would understand. And if we do that first, then once we've understood things in that context, then we can extrapolate, meaning, how does that apply to us? Does it apply to us? What was God really saying here? And then we can even get into the scientific stuff, and we can start talking about, okay, well, he created the stars on day 4, and then Adam was able to see starlight on day 6. Yet we know the stars are now calculated to be billions of light years away. How did they get there? Well, then we read where in multiple places where God stretched forth the heavens, and we can make some scientific hypotheses about that, and see if they fit within the laws of physics. And we can read Romans 1, and we can say that, the heavens declare the glory of God, and we understand that we can learn a lot about God and from the universe. And I think I did a live not too long ago where I talked about, or maybe it was just a post where I said that there's some people that say that the Bible is not a science textbook, or they say it's not a history textbook. That's not the purpose of the Bible. And my thought on that is that the Bible is actually better. It's not just a science textbook. It's not just a grammar book. It's not just a history book. It's all of those things perfect, rolled together into one single book. But on top of all of that, and of primary importance, is it's a spiritual guidebook. It's a textbook to tell us what we should be spiritually. So when you look at what the Bible says, understand what the context is, who's speaking, who's being spoken to, and understand it from that perspective first. Then draw application to yourself. So anyway, that's all I got for tonight. We'll do 22 here. Probably Thursday night, Wednesday night. Of course, I usually take off to watch my friends go live. So thank you for joining me. And if you have any questions, leave them in the comments, and I will definitely get to them as I can. All right, y'all have a good night.